Have you ever just stopped for a second to think about your thoughts? I don't mean what you're thinking about, but how you're thinking. We tend to imagine our consciousness is this big open space where we're free to make any choice we want. But what if that's not quite right? What if your mind has this invisible architecture, a blueprint that was built way before you even showed up? So let's start with this question. It seems pretty simple on the surface, right? But it really gets to the core of how we see our lives. We all like to believe we're in the driver's seat, making these big and small choices that steer us toward the future we want. But what if that feeling of control isn't the whole story? In this explainer, we're going to dig into this really fascinating idea that our consciousness isn't some empty field. Instead, it's more like a pre-built structure that kind of guides our thoughts, usually without us even having a clue that it's happening. We usually think of our mind as, a room. It's just a container, and our thoughts just kind of pop up inside of it. But let's try a different metaphor for a second. What if your mind is actually more like a building, with its own layout, its own hallways, windows, and doors already in place? And this is really the heart of it. We're always aware of the thoughts themselves. You could call them the furniture in the room. But we rarely, if ever, notice the architecture. We don't see the structure that dictates where the furniture can even go in the first place. So, okay, if our mind is a building, what is it made of? What are the core parts of this invisible architecture? Well, this framework breaks it down into 4 key ideas that really define how our consciousness flows. First up, you've got your view. Just think of these as the windows in your mind. They basically determine what you can even see as a possibility. If all the windows in your house only face north, you'll never see the sunrise in the east. It's not that you chose not to see it, it's just literally outside your view. Next, we have the gradient, and this one's really interesting. It's the idea that the floor of your mind isn't perfectly flat. It's got these subtle, invisible slopes that make you naturally roll towards certain decisions. You know that feeling when you're bored and you just reach for your phone? That's a gradient. There's a downhill slope, built by habit, that makes that action feel almost effortless. Then there's space. There's a great Japanese word for this, yahaku, which is kind of like the beautiful empty space in a painting. In our minds, this is our ability to just pause. It's the room you have to stand still on that sloped floor for a second and decide not to just roll down the easiest path. And finally, we have connection. These are the hallways and the doorways inside that building of your mind. They determine where one thought just naturally leads. Have you ever noticed how one tiny little worry can instantly connect to a huge, catastrophic one? Yeah, that's a pre-built hallway right there. And this quote just nails the whole shift in thinking. Instead of judging our choices as these separate good or bad points in time, this way of thinking asks us to look at the overall trajectory. It's not really about the one decision, but the slope you were already on that made that decision feel almost inevitable. So if these slopes and gradients are real, where in the world do they come from? Well, the thing is, they're not from these big, dramatic choices we make. They're actually the quiet result of the environment we're in every single day. I mean, just think about it. The constant pressure to instantly reply to every message, the endless performance reviews and social media likes that have us constantly comparing ourselves, the feeling that if you're not busy, you're wasting time. These things aren't just neutral parts of life. They're actively building the slopes in our minds. And that's the bottom line, really. Even when we feel like we're totally free, just wandering through the rooms of our mind, the architecture itself is quietly designing our path for us. Now, this might all sound a little bleak, right? Like we're just stuck with the building we've got. But can we actually change the design? Well, this framework suggests that yes, we can. And the tool for it is surprisingly simple. And it's not about finding answers. It's about changing the flow. So think about 2 different ways change can happen. On one hand, you have a collision. This is like hitting a wall. It's abrupt, it's forceful, there's friction, maybe even a little pain. But on the other hand, you have a question. This creates a much more gentle, smooth change. It allows the flow to just shift direction without all the drama. A simple question can act like a little structural tool. It's like putting a small, smooth stone in a stream. It doesn't stop the water, it just alters its path. The moment you ask yourself, wait, why am I rushing right now? You temporarily flatten that gradient of urgency. Suddenly, a little bit of that space appears. And from that space, you might just see a new path, a whole new view out a different window. And this might be the biggest takeaway of all. The whole point of asking the question isn't about getting the right answer. The question itself is the action. It's an act of mental renovation. It's a way to loosen those invisible slopes that guide you, just enough to give yourself a little bit of breathing room. Okay, so how does all this fit into the world we live in right now, especially with AI becoming such a huge part of it? Is AI just another thing that's going to build even steeper slopes in our minds? Well, here's a pretty radical way to reframe it. What if we stopped looking to AI for answers and started using it as a mirror? A mirror that can help us see our own mental blueprints a little more clearly. You could call this health scan mode. The idea is that you talk to an AI not to solve your problem, but to watch yourself trying to solve it. The AI's response isn't the truth. It's just a reflection of your own starting position, your own biases, and the very gradients you're rolling down. This totally flips the script on how we use these tools. AI becomes less of an answer machine and more of a consciousness awareness tool. The real prize isn't what it tells you, it's what you learn about yourself by seeing what you asked and how you asked it. So, as we wrap this up, the point of this whole exploration isn't to give you some final conclusion. In fact, that would kind of defeat the purpose. The goal here isn't to hand you an answer, but just to create a little gentle space in your own mind to reflect. And so, we're going to end with the same quiet, powerful question this whole idea leaves us with. And don't feel like you have to answer it right away. Just let it sit there. Think about the architecture of your own mind, your views, your gradients, your connections. What future just naturally flows from that design? Because maybe in the end, the future isn't something we choose moment by moment. Maybe it's just the water that flows into the shape of the vessel that we've already and perhaps unknowingly created.